take about 10 minutes to get up and mingle and find someone that matches a bingo space. And if you have a bingo, say it. And I have prizes. So, should be really exciting. Cool prizes. I mean, you already got a gift bag. You're getting everything today. So, okay. So we'll do about 10 minutes. Get up, mingle, go to different tables, and go. Okay, thank you all for participating. At the break, if you got a bingo, please come see me and I will give you a prize. And thank you for coming. And I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Mobility Director, Jeremy Keene.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us tonight. Thank you for being curious about what we do at Public Works and Mobility. Thanks for giving us a chance to talk about it a little bit. I always say that if my phone's not ringing, that's a good sign because it means we're doing our job well. Public Works does a lot of the things that are just behind the scenes that you expect to work every day, and for the most part they do. So, I'm Jeremy Keene. I'm the Director for Public Works and Mobility. I have a number of my staff here tonight that are here to answer any and all questions you might have. So, Brian Hensel, our Deputy Director for Streets.
Good evening.
Logan McGinnis, Deputy Director for Utilities. Right in between is Ross Mullenhauer. He's our engineering manager. And Aaron Wilson is our transportation planning manager. And Ben Weiss is a senior planner with our transportation section. And at the door we have Lori Hart. She does our communications. And we also have Mirta Bracera, who's our city council person and chair of the Public Works Committee. So you have the whole team here tonight. I have a short presentation just to kind of give you an idea of what we do, but then I hope you'll have some questions for all these folks to dive in a little deeper, and then we have a fun exercise for you. So with that, our mission is really to deliver high quality infrastructure and reliable utilities, responsive customer service. So we're really about providing safe streets, making sure your toilet flushes and goes where it needs to go, providing clean water, and really it's a lot of the core things that the city does. We base our work around the city's strategic plan. And what that really means for us, first and foremost, is providing those core services, things like clean drinking water, taking care of wastewater collection, and what we call resource recovery, which is really cleaning the water, getting the solids out of it, and recovering those resources. We turn the biosolids into compost and divert a lot of the wastewater onto a land application where, if you've been out on Mullen Road, you see all the poplar trees. And then what goes back into the river is a safe and clean water. And then we also do stormwater, working on water quality and flood protection. We do street maintenance, so that's streets, sidewalks, bikeways, all of that stuff that we use to get around. And oddly enough, we also have the city cemetery in Public Works Department, so it's kind of cradle to grave. We also get involved in community design and livability, and so this is really the functions around how we grow as a city. Regulations around development, the process for design review, a portion of that flows through Public Works. We also have some city-owned land that we work with in both looking at how we can leverage the land that the city owns for good public use. Maintenance and repair, sustainability is a big part of what we talk about. We'll talk more about that as we go through this presentation. We also look at economic health. We know that what we do is important for the private sector as well, and the economics of our city. So we really look at collaborative policy making, the ways that we can create good opportunities for business and for job growth and incomes. We do a lot of work around grant writing and administration. So if you've read any of the news recently, in the past couple of years, we've brought in over $100 million of federal grants for transportation projects. So that's that's one of the ways that we can get things done without having to tax all of our citizens. So we've been really successful at writing competitive grants and bringing money back to Missoula. We do a lot of work around community partnerships. We wouldn't be successful without our community partners, both in the nonprofit sector and as well as private sector partners that we work with. And then organizational excellence and resiliency. This is really about developing our staff and our processes internally at the city to make sure that we're building a good workforce that can do all these things, that we look at our space, our office spaces and our technology. Thinking about employee safety and well-being, we do a lot of dangerous work when we're doing construction, when we're doing work with the utilities, and we need to make sure that our folks stay safe. Community engagement, what we're doing tonight, we want to make sure that we are good at talking about what we do and getting information out to the public to let all of you know what's going on and give folks an opportunity to provide input. And then results-oriented management is really about how do we measure what we're doing? How do we know if we're successful? And how do we create some metrics around all the things we're doing to measure that? So our department's about 175 people. We have 5 different divisions. Administration, which is what I'm part of, and we have a team of folks that do our administrative services, utility billing and finance, communications, and safety and risk management. And then we have a planning and engineering division. This is the group that Ross and Aaron lead. Does both transportation planning and engineering. And our transportation planning is also, it also staffs what we call the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So it's the MPO, it's how we administer federal funding for transportation. So it's a joint agency that works with the county and Department of Transportation, Mountain Line to make sure that those transportation dollars all get spent well. Missoula in Motion is the group that helps work on transportation demand management. So they're the folks that are working on finding you a carpool or an easier way to get to the bus or a way to ride your bike so that we don't have to rely solely on cars, on single vehicles to get us around. And then a lot of that work that happens in planning goes to the engineering division. We have a group that focuses on both development review and also creating our own projects for both surface transportation and utilities. And then the other side of our department is really more oriented around operations and maintenance. So street operations and maintenance, that's all the street work, potholes, paving, snow plowing. They also take care of all our street lights and signals, and signing and striping. So a lot of the basic nuts and bolts that go into our street system. And similarly in utilities, we have 3 utilities, Missoula Water, Stormwater, and Wastewater. And so you see them out and about maintaining all those different systems and making sure those continue to function well. And then finally the city cemetery. If you've never been there, I invite you to go over there. It's on the north side. It's a beautiful space with old trees and a lot of history. The cemetery is over 100 years old and just has a really great connection to Missoula's history. And it's a public space, so we invite people to go there. I won't take too much time on these, but I've talked about it a little bit. Our administration group is 18 different staff members. We take care of everything from staffing our public committees, city council, and other public boards that we help support, and taking care of 27,000 utility customers in Missoula. Planning and engineering, like I said, their primary purpose is really to help plan, implement, support public and private infrastructure. So we're doing the upfront planning and then seeing those projects through all the way to construction. So just a couple of key metrics, things that we track with planning and engineering. This year, we're going to see 18 different utility projects totaling $31 million in construction. That's a pretty big number. It includes both things like water main replacement, which you've probably been seeing around town. We're replacing 100-year-old water mains that are leaking with new pipes that won't leak and will save us money and save water. And we're also doing work at the wastewater treatment plant. There's a fairly significant project happening with the compost operation that will upgrade that facility to do a better job of protecting groundwater, reducing some of the smells that are created when you make compost, and just make that operation a lot more efficient. We've also got 18 different transportation projects underway, including 5 sidewalk and mobility projects. We're continuing to work on our bicycle and pedestrian network. This is just an important strategy we have around transportation of providing options for folks to get around, and continuing to see increases in the number of users. And then supporting development, new construction. 111 new construction building permits issued in FY24, and 173 new dwelling units. So it's an important part of what we do to make sure that we continue to provide housing for folks as Missoula grows. And then you see the number at the bottom, $130 million in transportation grants for our region. So here's a couple more metrics that we look at with transportation and engineering. Obviously, one of our goals, we have a Vision Zero policy. Our goal is to reduce the number of serious and fatal accidents to zero. And that blue line is not going the right direction for us. This is something we're seeing nationally, that the trend nationally has been that traffic safety is actually, it was on a long decline for a number of years, and then when the pandemic hit, we saw it reverse, and it has not flattened out yet and started to go their direction. So that's something that we're really looking at closely. We're looking at ways that we can help influence safety in our transportation system, and being thoughtful about the projects we do. One of the ways we're approaching that is with quick build projects, and this is a way that we can respond quickly and inexpensively to safety needs. And we do that with paint and delineators and simple things that can make big differences in terms of safety. And so we've to date deployed 74 different quick build traffic calming projects, and you can see over the last few years, each year we've been able to do a few more. So and then our housing metric, looking at the total number of building permits that we're issuing, or the total number of dwelling units that we're creating. You can see that we had a real big year in 2021. What's that number? Over 1,300 units. You know, the estimates are that we need somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 units every year just to accommodate growth. And so we've been lagging behind for a long time, and you can see that after 21 it dipped again, and that was largely because of interest rates changing. We're starting to see it turn around again, where in 24 we got to looks like 584 units. So still quite a bit short of where we need to be, but it's an important metric that we're looking at. So shifting over to utilities. Our water utility, pretty simple purpose: protect health and safety of Missoula by providing clean, safe drinking water, and also providing fire protection. This is a big piece of what we do that maybe people don't really realize, but we need to make sure that there's fire protection, that there's water and water pressure available should we have a fire, either in an isolated location or a more broad event in the community. So we make sure that we're prepared for those kinds of emergencies. This is 340 miles of mains under our streets, 40 different wells. We pump all of our water from wells. We have an amazing aquifer in Missoula, and it produces all of our water with very little treatment. We don't have to treat the water very much, so we're careful about protecting that aquifer. We have 26 storage facilities. These are mostly tanks that are up on the hillsides where we can pump the water and store it. And a number of booster stations and pressure reducing stations which help make the system work. So all in all, that's 9.4 billion gallons of water each year. So we also maintain a bunch of fire hydrants, make sure that those are ready to go if they're ever needed. And when did we start the meter replacement? 2019, 2020? So we've been working on replacing all of the meters in our system with modern, more reliable meters that can be read more easily so that we don't have to go into the house to read the meter, and also that can provide better data for the customer so that you can tell what your water use is, and if you have a problem, if there's a water leak in your house, you would be able to detect that. So we're most of the way through that project. I think we're probably in our last year or two of replacing all those meters. And finally, we do testing. We test our water on a regular basis to make sure that it's clean and safe. So water main replacement has been one of our big goals, because we know that this is one of the ways that we can really reduce our cost, is by getting these old leaky mains replaced and reducing the amount of water that we have to pump. And so you can see that in the last couple of years, we've really been able to increase the number of miles that we have replaced in water mains. And our goal is to replace about 1% of the system every year. So that, if you think about it, that's roughly a 100-year life cycle of a pipe. So we need to be replacing a certain number of pipes every year to keep up with that. So we're a little short of that goal, but we're doing pretty well in getting that work done. And we're seeing the results of that. So this is a graph of the leakage that we're monitoring in the system, and we can test for leakage to see if what we're doing with water main replacement is actually working. You can see that back in about 21, we finally turned that corner where now the leakage rate is going down. And so that's a really encouraging sign for us that we're starting to get ahead of the curve on that maintenance and replacement of water lines. So the wastewater utility, similar, our goal is to provide safe and environmentally conscious management and disposal of our wastewater. So with 75,000 people here in Missoula, we have to make sure that all of that is carefully treated. So we have 28 different lift stations as part of our collection system, as well as 1,700 residential and commercial sewer tank pumping systems. We call them step systems. So they're it's like a small lift station that might be for an individual house or a group of houses. So all of these pump that water to our wastewater treatment plant. It's 2.8 billion gallons of wastewater, and we remove 78% of the nitrogen, 90% of the phosphorus from that before it's discharged back to the river. We also divert about 155 million gallons of treated wastewater to irrigate the poplar trees. And this is it's kind of an experimental project. We've had some success and some failures with it. We're continuing to look at the opportunity to do land application of that wastewater, because it reduces the amount of nutrients that are going into the river, especially during the summer. And that's the time when what happens with nutrients in the river is it causes algae growth and other things to happen in the river that throw off the chemistry of the river and affects wildlife and that ecosystem. So the more we can divert that water during the summer to land apply, the better it is for the river. We've also really been focused on sustainability with the wastewater utility, because between water and wastewater, we are the biggest power user in the city. And so that has a big impact on our climate, our climate footprint. And so we've been looking at ways that we can be more sustainable in both wastewater and water. Starting first with just being more efficient, so changing things like pumps, replacing them with more efficient pumps, but also looking at the ways that we can use green energy. So we have a 570 kilowatt solar farm at the wastewater plant that produces a portion of our electricity. We also have a biogas generator that burns the excess gases that are coming off the wastewater treatment system and creates electricity. And then we also make compost out of the biosolids, and that's another good way to reuse that resource. So this is just a quick graph of what our power usage looks like at the wastewater treatment plant. You can see the green is the solar, blue is the cogen, that's the biogas generator, and then brown is purchased electricity off the grid. So still, you can see that we still have to purchase most of our electricity. And here's kind of an example of why is the solars, every one of those green spikes is the daytime production of the solar, and then the red in between is what we have to use other energy sources for. So it helps, but it's not the whole package. And we're getting anywhere from 15 to 25% of our power from that solar farm, but there still has to be some other resources to make the whole picture work. And then finally, stormwater. Really thinking about how we protect our water quality and our rivers. So we've done the goal of stormwater is really to protect that, to provide the infrastructure and protect those water quality resources. And to also ensure compliance with state, federal, local laws for stormwater management. So we have some regulations that we have to meet, and the stormwater utility is tasked with making sure that we're complying with those. And it's everything from controlling runoff from construction sites to making sure that we're not dumping hazardous waste into our aquifer, into the river. And we do a lot of training and education around that, both of our own staff and also the general public and the contractor community, to make sure that they understand what's good practice and why is it important. So around town we have about 10,000 dry well sumps. So these are the most of the inlets that you see around town. It's just a structure that allows the water to infiltrate right into the ground. That's a really unique thing with Missoula. We have very cobbly, gravelly soils, and so they take water really well. It means that stormwater is fairly easy to handle in Missoula. We don't have to pipe a lot of our stormwater, but it also means that there's that opportunity for any contaminants to get right into the groundwater. And so we have to really be careful about how we protect those inlets to make sure that we're not polluting the aquifer. So we do a lot of water quality sampling. We do a lot of cleaning of those inlets and also the storm drain pipes that we have. And recently we've done several projects where our storm water systems outfall to the river, and creating better ways of treating that water before it gets to the river. So a couple of years ago we did Cattail Corner, which is on the corner of 39th and Russell Street. We redid that whole wetland, which is it's really a stormwater treatment facility, and the new system that we've now got in place there will do a better job of treating the water and also be easier for us to maintain over time. And then this year we're working on a project for the outfall of that system where it goes to the Bitterroot River. So similarly, we're creating some natural function to help clean the water before it hits the river. So this is just a metric of how many dry wells and inlets we've cleaned each year, and we try to target so there's roughly 10,000 of these, and so we're trying to get to anywhere from 400 to 500 a year to make sure that we're keeping up with the maintenance on those. And streets, so the purpose there is really to ensure that our public streets, alleys, bike lanes, lighting, signals, signs are all well maintained so that they provide safe travel routes, and that they're maintained for maximum longevity. So one of the things with streets is that if you don't maintain them, kind of like your house, if you don't paint your house, eventually it's going to need to you're going to have to replace the siding. And so a lot of the work you see us doing is preventative maintenance, where we're doing chip seals or repaving, thin lift paving jobs to maintain that overall street so that we don't have to reconstruct the whole thing. So we have 337 miles of streets, 65 miles of alleys. We do all of the snow plowing, street sweeping, and leaf collection. We do work with traffic calming and crosswalks. We have 73 traffic signals and 480 streetlights that the city maintains. And we also install and maintain communications equipment for the police and other city vehicles, as well as our overall radio system that the police and fire and public works all use to communicate. So this is a fun metric. This is like an easy way of figuring out how good our pavement is, because the number of potholes is an indicator of how quickly your street's failing. And so we're getting right into pothole season now as it warms up a little bit, and Brian's crews are busy patching potholes, but you can see it's gone up pretty consistently every year. And what that tells me is that we're not doing enough of the preventative maintenance to prevent those streets from becoming worse, because usually once you get a pothole, that's a sign that you're starting to get a larger failure. So that's a concern in terms of the amount of resources we're able to put towards it. We did some pavement condition studies a few years back to really try to figure out, how much do we need to be investing to maintain a reasonable level of service for our pavement. And if you think about your grades at school, we kind of picked, we want to get to at least a C, maybe a C plus, to make sure that pavement is staying decent. And we're kind of struggling to stay at that level, and it's going to be one of the things that, with costs increasing and our city growing, is struggle to keep up with all of that. All right, so finally the cemetery. This is an interesting part of what we do as a city. It's both kind of a historical role, and also just providing a space for people to respect and remember their loved ones, and have a quiet, safe place to be. It really is a beautiful facility. It was founded in 1884. Purchased by the city for $1. So I can tell you that being in the cemetery business isn't a good business. you sell a plot and then you maintain it forever, but I think it really is it's an important part of our history, and it's an important green space, and it provides a connection to the community and to our history that I think is important to maintain and to take care of. So if you haven't been out there, it really is an amazing place. All right, that's a lot of information in not very much time, but hopefully you thought of some questions, and I'm going to bring these guys up to help me answer them. So you and then over there.
So you mentioned, or you showed the number of dollars you got from the federal and state as grants versus the actual general fund that you get, through taxes.
Yeah.
How does that translate to kind of the operational budget and just doing the preventive maintenance that you described in all the different metrics?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, when we get grant money, it almost never takes care of maintenance. So it takes care of building the stuff, but it doesn't take care of maintaining the stuff. So that's one of the places that we struggle. We add more things, but then we don't have more money to maintain. So most of our operational budget comes from local dollars. It's coming from our tax base. And so, which is largely property taxes and gas taxes. So that is one of the dilemmas with getting all that federal money, is it doesn't come with maintenance dollars.
How do you handle that basically? I mean, because that would just imply that it's always going to increase at a certain percentage. So how do you handle that?
Well, I guess one way to look at it is that a lot of the federal dollars we're getting is going to take care of deferred maintenance. So we're not building a lot of new stuff, or we're largely reconstructing things. So when we do, for instance, the Downtown SAM project, which is one of the big grants that we got, it will repave a lot of the downtown streets. It'll replace streetlights. It'll upgrade the traffic signals. It'll take care of sidewalk maintenance or old sidewalks that need to be replaced. And so all of that work reduces our maintenance load, so that all of that deferred maintenance isn't something that we have to take care of ourselves. So that's part of the answer. But operationally, we still have to have enough folks to be able to do the daily preventative maintenance.
I think the plans are described discussions for purple pipe for reclaimed water?
Purple pipe, so that's like gray water systems? I don't know that we have any serious projects around that, but it's something that we've looked at. I think the other thing we've looked at is doing like ground source heat systems, which is sort of a similar idea that you could provide as a utility to help folks with heating their homes. So, I don't know, Logan, do you have any thoughts on gray water systems?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly would be willing to. It just, it's expensive to run a whole network of purple pipe, right? Like purple pipe is reclaimed water. Some communities are doing it. We certainly would be open to doing it if there was a user somewhere near the wastewater plant that wanted water. I mean, water's relatively plentiful here in the valley, so we're not seeing a lot of demand. I know Bozeman is building a purple pipe system for a couple big users near the wastewater plant, so I would bet in 20 years maybe we have. I mean, we're definitely open to it. We're irrigating our poplars and we're looking at maybe transitioning to alfalfa or something different, but it takes a higher level of treatment, to make reclaimed water. So there's a cost that goes into it, but something we'd definitely be open to if there was an end user that wanted it. So I mean, it could be in the future city park. I mean, I'd say it's definitely we've talked about it.
Yeah, so you all cover a lot of ground with less than 200 employees. That's amazing. You guys are doing a great job. So two questions. One about the federal dollars. Is there any discussion about are those grants going to come through anymore, or where are you sending your grants now, or how are the federal dollars flowing? Will they continue to? Another one related to the water. I got that thing in my water bill that says, oh, you want to check the quality of our water, I go to this, and it's been sitting on my desk forever and I've never gone. And you just sort of addressed it about all the things that are not in the water or whatever. Can that change, and does that water quality that you see, where you tested, will it change by the time it gets to our house? I'm always amazed that I can turn my faucet on and that water is delicious and cold and clear and all of that.
Yeah, great question. I'll answer the federal funding question first, which is we don't know. It's making us nervous. There's a lot of unpredictability right now, but at the end of the day, infrastructure tends to be a bipartisan kind of thing that everybody likes, and we have a lot of good reasons to believe that that's going to continue to flow to us, and we're going to stay the course until we hear otherwise. I'll let Logan maybe talk about the water testing.
Sure. Yeah. Our water quality is very stable. You can get on our website. We have years of water quality reports, and they look identical. But we do lots of testing for metals and nitrates and bacteries and radionuclide. There's a lot of different stuff that the EPA requires us to test for, and we comply easily with all the kind of federal requirements. Our water quality is just, we're very blessed here in the valley. And like Jeremy said, it's susceptible, right? We're porting all of our stormwater right on top of our aquifer, which doesn't really seem like that great of an idea, but it's, we are blessed. The aquifer provides filtration, the vadosome filter stuff. We've studied it. We were concerned, and we got a grant 10 or 15 years ago and looked, and we couldn't find any indication that stormwater was impacting our drinking water. So we're very blessed, but it's very susceptible. A train spills and a tanker load of something, it's going right into the aquifer because there's nothing to stop it. So one of the blessings of our system is we have 42 wells or something. They're all over the valley. So a few years ago, Billings had the big oil spill in the river. They have one intake, and they had to shut the thing down, and it got shut down minutes before the oil hit it. And at that point, they had they were just operating on water in tanks. And so we're just so much more resilient because of the number of wells we have and just the nature that they're spread all over. And the Missoula aquifer it's kind of dilution is a solution. Water screams through the valley, and so there was dry cleaners and things years ago, and that's all kind of flushed out of the system. So our water quality is really good. Sorry, I'm probably taking more time than I should. And we have been a little concerned about, are we using too much water? I mean, climate changes, you know, what's happening with the aquifer. So we did a little study just in the last year. We hired a real smart math guy, and he did a bunch of math that I didn't understand, so I won't try to explain it. But I mean, he convinced us that, you know, the trends we're not impacting the aquifer. I mean, we could in the future, because it's like 90% based on water leaking out of the Clark Fork River. And so if if the Clark Fork River dries up, the aquifer dries up too. So I mean, I think we're in a really good place, but it's something we definitely need to keep an eye on, because I think we change.
I think the other part of your question too is what happens downstream in the pipes, right? So you can also introduce contaminants in the piping systems, and one of the big concerns recently has been lead pipes. And we're also very fortunate there that we have little or no lead piping in our system. It just wasn't used in Missoula, and
None. Yeah, there's no lead certified in Missoula.
so, but there could be lead pipes inside of buildings that.
Potentially. I mean, nobody's ever heard of them. I mean, EPA required us to complete an inventory, and we did some. You know, we've got a lot of data. We've been looking at this for years. Every time we see a pipe, we take a sample of it and categorize it. So we used all that data to kind of convince EPA, like with a 99.99 whatever percent confidence level, that there's no lead pipes. But I mean, that's not to say there couldn't be in somebody's house. I don't think that material was really used in Missoula. We found, I've been here 25 years, and I've heard of maybe 5 or 6 lead goosenecks, which a gooseneck can be used to, say your water service line's coming out here and the mains down here. They would, back in the day, they would use a malleable kind of pipe to make that elevation adjustment, and that's called a gooseneck. And so we have found a few of those, and we've obviously replaced them if we become aware of it. It's just very few and far between. So.
I got a pedestrian and traffic safety question for you. I know you guys are doing some like big picture stuff, say Reserve Street. I've seen the questionnaire out about some people's priorities for that, and we'd like to see. How do you guys prioritize some of the smaller stuff? I don't want to go through and like list every problematic intersection I can think of right off the top of my head, but there are some I think that around town are like kind of famously glaring, and I would be curious to know how those, what seem like some of the simple fixes to the general public who sort of fall a little lower on the priority list versus maybe some of these other big picture things.
Yeah, you're going to like our exercise, because that's really what it's about. But I don't know if Aaron or Ben, you want to talk about kind of how we look at both big projects and small?
Yeah, sure. So our exercise today is we're looking at some of the maybe medium to big size projects. One of the challenges in Missoula is that every main street that you can think of, Reserve, Brooks, Russell, 3rd, Higgins, Orange, they are owned by the State Department of Transportation. We are tasked with maintaining them, but we don't necessarily have the say over what happens on those streets. So it's a collaborative process. It can sometimes take a while if that's where a concern is. But on like our local streets, we have a lot of legacy, uncontrolled intersections, they're called. There's no stop sign in any direction in a neighborhood. And we, about 7 years ago or so, we looked at the crash history, the crashes all around the city, and we identified the top 10 or 12 crash locations at those unsignalized places or uncontrolled places, and we've put stop signs in or address those as immediately as possible. And then the rest of them that have a very limited crash history, we are systematically going through neighborhood by neighborhood and introducing these quick build calming circles and alternating those with stop signs to try and correct some of that missing infrastructure that's there.
I have a quick follow-up question. Is that sort of different layers of bureaucracy between Federal Highway Administration, Montana State Department of Transportation, local, say Orange Street, part of the reason that like the underpass there seems relatively poorly signed when you're exiting from the interstate, and I live on the north side very near that underpass, and often during the day we'll see a lot of semis kind of doing low looks right before they go underneath it, and then there's that sort of spaghetti of one-way streets up there. and it just kind of backs everything up. So is it that different, there's different three layers of bureaucracy, why you can't just toss it to the sun, the same don't exit through there if you're in an overhang vehicle?
Well, that one is, there's actually a signal, like there's a sensor on the interstate that will flash a light, and so a driver will have had to ignore several opportunities to get to that point where they need to like back up and then take a left onto 2nd Street, which is too narrow up there. A driver will have had to ignore several warning signs. Yeah, there's not much, but that also came out of, that was kind of several safety plans, looking at stuff with the state and thinking, what can we do? The other big one where the interaction is a little strange between interstate system and our local streets is wrong way. People who enter the freeway going the wrong way has led to some really high profile fatal crashes. And so, you can't just put like spikes down, those one-way spikes or something, but we did look at, talk to the state and said, hey, look, we know this is an issue, you do too, how can we help each other here, what can we do? And we added some signs. A lot of that changed when the roundabouts got put in with the Van Buren and Orange Street exits. I think that really cut down on some of that, but it can just be a while. We have a good relationship with our district folks at the state DOT, but sometimes the decision gets made by someone in Helena that hasn't been here, or doesn't know what our goals are, and then we disagree with it, and then we have back and forth, and it can just take yeah, the truck one is tough. That's really driver error at some point.
Did you have?
Yeah, I have two that are a little bit different. One is like, how do you decide when to put those, I love that you're calling them calming circles or things, or something like, in my neighborhood, there's like, it's called a speed table. And like, or then there's like Patty Canyon Road that has like the little mini bumps that you go over. I don't know, like, what's the decision-making process?
Yeah, so we have a team that meets every other week that includes our engineers, planners, our maintenance people, the guys that are actually out hanging the signs, and Jeremy's there when schedule allows, and we talk through them. We field complaints. There's a variety of ways that people can reach out. I get emailed or called directly. There's forms on the website you can fill out. Some people just call the Public Works gentleman. We have a running agenda. We try and collect data if we don't already have it about the speeds, volumes. We look at things like the sight distance when you're approaching an intersection. What are there obstacles that affect how you can see oncoming traffic or cross traffic? And try and determine, and then look at do we have goals for the street? Is the street connected to a school? And maybe we don't want to stop them too much because you get additional noise pollution at stop signs when people accelerate. Even that couple seconds of idling, it increases the tailpipe emissions. And so how can we maintain flow but make these places safer? And every place gets its own some sort of evaluation based on as many factors as we can address. And at some point, there's a cost piece of that too, is we can't do the Cadillac at every location.
I think the other factor is that we have different classifications of streets. So some of them are arterials and collectors and local streets, and depending on what the street is used for, it limits the options that we have for things like traffic calming. So like a speed table might be appropriate on a local street, but we don't typically use them on fire routes where they need to be able to go.
The Patty example is a great one because when you're going up the hill, that's the main kind of access and evacuation route for anyone who lives up there. And so our fire department tells us that we can't do much to that. But the people who live in the residential section, they say, hey, right across Higgins, it's calm and you have these wonderful speed tables. Why can't we have those? And so we try and work with fire and figure, okay, what can we do that doesn't inhibit your movement, but that someone in a sedan can't just go 100.
So if I understand correctly, water and sewer are public utility, but then things like power and trash are private. What determines in Missoula whether it's public or private when it comes to utilities?
Yeah, little bit of history maybe. It's just, so Missoula is, some of the other cities in Montana do sanitation, they do garbage collection. Missoula has never done that to my knowledge. The things like gas and electricity and communications have always been private utilities, and they enjoy some of the same status as a utility, that they can occupy public right-of-way, but they're privately run companies, and they're regulated by the Public Service Commission. So it's a little bit of both in most cities, but I'd say generally water and sewer have been public utilities, and in most cities, you know, if you remember, Missoula had to condemn the water system to take over ownership of it, and that was a major step that we took to protect what we thought was an important public asset that we needed to have control over. So I'm not sure who's next. Lost track, but Kelly, you want to?
I recently got to go on a field trip up the landfill, and they were like really boasting about how great their ratings are and how they get graded in their system and all of these different things. But they pointed to, because the runoff water through the landfill goes to our water treatment plant. And so the question here is, do we charge them more? And how much more? Like, I just feel like that's such a giant pollution that is going into our water treatment.
They don't produce that much water. I mean, and it's very nasty.
Yeah.
The stuff that comes out of the landfill is, you wouldn't want to drink it, that's for sure. I don't remember, I'd have to look at our tables. They certainly, you know, we have higher rates for industrial discharges. I don't remember how much more per gallon in a, you know, commercial or residential.
Okay, I'm going to go to you next since you haven't asked a question. I'll come back to you guys.
So you broached the subject of potholes. Probably one of our favorite subjects. If you think about, okay, why do we have potholes? You'll hear a lot of, about where we live, the freeze, the thaw, that adds an element. I would assume that there's, people have figured out ways to build streets that are less susceptible, but perhaps the cost to build them is so cost prohibitive that you can't do it. Can you just talk a little bit about what the options are and perhaps why we operate our street maintenance in the way we do?
Yeah, you want to talk about that, Brian?
I'll try. Are you referring to alternative methods for paving streets beyond asphalt?
Yeah, paving, or the foundational work perhaps, or whatever it might be. I'm assuming that different communities have found different ways to do it, but there might be environmental reasons like our latitude that says that doesn't work this far north, for example.
So I don't have a whole lot of experience with alternative methods beyond paving, and even minimally on concrete other than doing curb and sidewalk work. But I will tell you, the little bit of research that I have done is that, say, for example, permeable pavement is not available here. It's supposedly really not intended for areas where we have winters and freeze thaws. It doesn't work. There's also been talk about permeable pavers, which are basically concrete blocks with gaps in them that are able to handle street loading because of the vehicles. Well, underneath those permeable pavers are gravel, rocks, fabric. It's basically a drain system underneath, down to probably 3 or 4 feet. And I've done a couple. I've done like 30 square feet, 2 little projects, and they worked. I mean, they're really cool, and I put them in places where we weren't able to put in a conventional dry well over some because of utility conflicts. So they worked really well. But to remove that much base underneath every street on a grand scale would cost a fortune. Hugely labor intensive.
Yeah, I think the main culprit is water, right? So the better drained your streets are, the longer they last. And any pavement will eventually wear out. But the more you can get the water out of them, the longer it lasts. And in a climate like ours where you get freeze thaw, that's where you really start to see the problems.
And we have permeable pavement on some streets where there's lots of problems. And we all see what happens because of that freeze thaw. And with conventional construction methods, with a cushion underneath 4 to 6 inches, or some cases none, that water drains through. saturates that base gravel, we get our freeze-thaw cycles, and it expands and blows up the asphalt. So there's a lot to it. But yeah, there's other ways to do it, but typically it's orders of magnitude more expensive. Did I answer your question?
Yep. All right. To kind of help us help you explain to people when they're complaining about all the potholes.
We go here and then they come back.
I'm pretty good at it, but thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, you talked about the kind of blessing of the aquifer and stuff like that. Is there an estimated like top threshold carrying capacity of the valley? And how is that, if there is, how do you kind of tie that back into kind of the strategic plans of the city and county that, you know, we've seen charts say, oh, we're going to grow at this, right? But at some point, like those two have to intersect. And so how do you guys plan for that? And how do you guys tie back into the economic plan that says we like to do all these things?
Yeah, well, Logan alluded to that a little bit. So we did an aquifer study to really ask the question, like we've seen a lot of these communities in the West running out of water. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't on a similar path, or that if we were, that we started to make some adjustments before we get there. So the aquifer studies showed that our aquifer is really pretty plentiful and that we don't have any immediate concerns with the growth that we see in the next 30 or 40 years in Missoula. We have plenty of water resources for that. But there will be a point where we need to start thinking about conservation of water and how we use water in terms of how much is available, and also just in terms of how much it costs to produce it, to pump it to where everybody needs to have it. So I do think that there are strategies that we will start to look at around water conservation. But like the first thing we're doing is we're trying to fix our leaks, because we know that's not a sustainable way to run a system if we're leaking half the water that we pump back into the ground. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was like well, two things. Like, is there a natural threshold that we estimate, like numbers of people or something like that? But two is like, what's the process to kind of tie that back into the strategic visions of the city and county? When they develop those plans, how do they take that into account formally from a planning perspective?
Yeah, well, a lot of what we're doing with our land use planning is looking at our capacity to accommodate growth and thinking about how we do that sustainably so that we don't use up all the space with a lot of low intensity, sprawly kind of growth. We recognize that to accommodate growth over a long period of time, we're going to have to develop more compactly, and that we need to make good use of the land. So being more thoughtful about the ways that the density occurs within the city limits is a lot of the thinking that goes into that, and there's multiple parts of that. So that's also one of the ways that we can provide more affordability, is to have some different housing types. We all may want to live in a single family house with a big yard, but that just isn't affordable for a lot of people, and so providing a variety of housing types is one of the ways that we look at affordability. And then the cost to provide infrastructure for development is also a big factor that we look at. So it's easier for us to provide infrastructure and services, things like schools and police and fire, if we develop more compactly as a community. So it costs less to do that, it's more efficient. And so we really are looking at ways that we can leverage the existing infrastructure and the existing services that we already have as we grow. And that preserves those lands that are further out for the longer term, so that we may see growth further out into the valley, but hopefully that's not for 50 or 100 years, and that we develop within our current city limits primarily in the near term. Okay, I think, let me go to you in the very back there. You had your hand up?
I was just going to ask, years ago I thought I heard something about a bypass, 93 bypass, to get some of the traffic off of Reserve. Since you said that you maintain Reserve, but it's owned by the DOT, would that be a similar thing where they would own or they would put the bypass in and relieve some of the stress on the traffic on that?
Yeah, that's one of the places we collaborate through our MPO. You want to talk about this, Aaron?
Yeah, and we hear a lot about the bypass, and we could talk about that if you want, but just in terms of building and maintaining infrastructure, we work collaboratively with the state, and so we have maintenance agreements where Brian's crew will go out. The state essentially pays us to maintain that because it's more efficient. We're here, we're already out plowing streets or doing things, and so there's some efficiency to be gained there. That's not the case everywhere. There are some streets, particularly out in the county, where they're state-owned or state highways where they're still doing the maintenance on those. Related to the bypass, I will just say we've talked about that a lot. Jerry mentioned we're doing some safety studies on Reserve Street and looking at that. And one of the tools we have now that we haven't necessarily in the past is data sources based on cell phone data that allow us to look at aggregates of, look at all the trips that are traveling, or, some estimate of all the trips that are traveling on Reserve Street and where are they starting and where are they stopping and what are the characteristics. And what we found on Reserve Street is that the vast majority of trips are local, that they're not the, 50, 100-mile trips where someone's going from Hamilton all the way up to the Flathead. That's a very small percentage of the trips. And so you build a bypass, costs a couple $100 million, which is effectively our 50 years worth of funding for infrastructure to accommodate, maybe less than, around 15% of the trips on Reserve Street. So just a good example of how we look at these things when you actually start looking at the dynamics and what would it cost to build a bypass versus how those trips are going. And so we work really closely with the state. Again, there's a lot of shared responsibility, and I think one of the areas we see a lot of frustration is someone might call the state and have a question or a concern about Reserve Street, and they might refer them to the city because part of that problem is related to the city, and they don't want to, unilaterally make that decision. And then we'll say, well, that's the state's route, and we have to work with them. And so I think it feels like people can get bounced around a lot, and we're trying to get better at just doing that collaborative work up front so that when someone calls, we have it's effectively the same answer of what we're trying to do.
So, bringing up the roads and potholes, I guess you're not going to do that up here without somebody bringing up sidewalks. And so, just wondering about, so I live on 4th, over here, I live up Tea Bakery, and it's in the older part of town and all that, and some of these sidewalks, talk about public safety, are really, really bad. And I talk to neighbors and say, well, I don't want to have it fixed because I don't want to have to pay for it. It's so expensive. I don't think I've ever lived in a town before where sidewalks have been such an issue, and they can really sort of make the community look ratty, and make it difficult for people, pedestrian traffic and that sort of thing. So what is the deal with sidewalks? Why?
Yes. Sidewalks are a huge challenge for us. So we routinely hear that people love sidewalks. They like to be able to walk. Walkability is important, but very few people want to pay for them. And they're expensive. So that is one of our big struggles. And we have sidewalks that were built 50 to 100 years ago in Missoula, all over the place, and they're all at their life. They're starting to crumble, the trees are starting to heave them, and we have a lot of problems. So it's a big issue. The way we currently address it is we try to tackle the worst ones first, and it is a homeowner's responsibility. So we're not out there looking for every single crack in the sidewalk, but when we do get a complaint, when we do find an issue, we contact that homeowner and we ask them to repair the sidewalk. And then if they don't, because it's kind of a shared liability between the homeowner and the city, we will take action and repair the sidewalk, and then we assess the homeowner for the cost. So it's not super popular when that happens. And Ross could talk a little bit about some of the ways we've looked at repairing sidewalks that are less expensive.
I think people all over the country talk about sidewalks probably way more than they would probably like to. And it is a big deal in the community, and we try to prioritize we try to let homeowners, as soon as we find out about a hazardous sidewalk, if you know of some, you're welcome to report them too. We try to go out there and look at them and identify the hazard, try to see where it stacks up compared to, you know, obviously we're trying to deal with the worst of the worst. And then we've got different mechanisms in place, either financial mechanisms to help the property owner. We have some low cost loans, low interest rate loans that we can use to help finance that burden for the property owner. We've actually got deferral options in place now. So we've got a bunch of financial mechanisms to try to make it easier. We also work with them to help them find a contractor to deal with it, but kind of ultimately the win for the city is if the property owner can step up and take care of it on their own. In the worst of the worst cases, we might step in and try to do our own project. And we're actually exploring some ideas for some lower cost alternatives rather than replacing the sidewalk. We know that concrete has a pretty high carbon cost. And so whenever we can work with what we've got rather than just replacing it, I think that's a win too.
Are homeowners allowed to fix their own sidewalk without going to the city?
Oh yeah.
Did they contract with some?
Yeah, we do require that they hire a licensed contractor, but yeah, you can hire your own. Okay, how are we doing on time?
You better stop. Okay, yeah, we'll have a 10-minute break, if that works, and then we'll come back and do the exercise. If you are a bingo winner, come see me for your wonderful prize.
And thank you for all your questions. Feel free to grab one of this one time.
Okay, everyone, can we get back to our seats? Then I'm going to hand it over to Ben for our exercise.
I used to live I lived in 15 Which house is that? So it's in.
Okay, thank you everybody for sticking around. I hope you're able to get some snacks and digest all of that information that Jeremy just shared. Before we get into the heart of the exercise, I'm going to share a little bit more about the transportation planning process and how we prioritize projects around town and what we've come up with for an exercise. So, Aaron is the director of our Metropolitan Planning Organization. That is a federally required interjurisdictional agency that one of their main duties is to maintain a long-range plan. So we have to update it every 4 years. It needs to look 20 to 30 years into the future, estimate population growth, estimate the amount of money that we can reasonably expect to receive for transportation projects, and then allocate that funding towards the sorts of projects that the community wants to see to achieve its goals. And so what we have started to realize, that estimation, we've been really good at it to a certain degree. When we go back and reread old plans, I think it was our 1994 plan, it estimated our county population, our 2015 county population to within 100 people accurately. So we're really good at that element of it. Where we're not as good, or where it's still kind of up in the air, is how much money do we get? We only have historical projections to use, and that changes with, for example, the previous administration, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and a couple of the others created generational opportunities for money. And so part of this planning process is we try and put ourselves in a position to go after funding like that when it becomes available. One of the things that we also do when we look at that population growth, we model how, where are all the trips going and how do people get around? And what we found is that at our current rates of driving, that as Missoula continues to grow, and with the money that we have available and land available for infrastructure projects, that a lot of our streets, if we continue to drive alone at the same rates that we drive alone, by 2050, a lot of our streets start to look like Reserve on a Friday afternoon. They start to look like that for much of the week and most of the time. And so we need to we will never have enough money to build our way out of congestion like that. And even if we did, I don't know that we would want to live in the community that just had 8, 10, 12 lane roads getting people around. It would destroy a lot of the reasons why we live here. So our strategy is to provide other ways for people to get around. We can change the mode of transportation, we can change the time of trips, and we can change the duration of, the length of trips by locating land uses closer to where people live. And so all of our planning documents are kind of aimed at providing those options for people, and that includes the types of projects that the long-range plan prioritizes. So when we look at the big regional scale projects, this slide up right now identifies some of the big transformative projects that we think we need to do in order to keep our current levels of traffic congestion as Missoula grows. The estimated, we're growing a little over 1% a year, and so that means over 25 years we grow about 30%, 33%. Our population increases by a third, but we can keep the traffic the same, roughly, if we provide those options for people and reduce the percentage driving alone. And so this slide shows kind of the top 10 large transformative projects, and it includes Russell, which has been underway for 30 years. It includes the Downtown Safety Access Mobility Project that Jeremy alluded to. It includes Highway 200 and East Missoula, and really turning that into a main street through East Missoula, and we received a grant for that. South Avenue we received a grant for, from Reserve out to Target Range. We received a build grant to complete the kind of network of more major streets out in the Mullen area, the George England Boulevard, George Elmer, and Mary Jane extensions. It looks at a new interchange up by the north side of Coal Mine Road by the dump, and kind of a network, a main street to connect North Reserve over to Scott Street and help relieve some of the traffic over there. It looks at a transformation of Brooks into running what's called bus rapid transit. So that is high frequency transit service up and down the Brooks corridor, where we received a grant to do a kind of in-depth feasibility study of what that would look like and what it would take. The other major project on this is an extension of the Milwaukee Trail. Currently it ends just west of Reserve Street, and our Parks Department has been putting they've been getting the property in place to extend that with a bridge over the Clark Fork and connect up to that neighborhood out Mullen Road, which we call Swipticane, based on the Salish name for the area. And so those are some of the bigger picture kind of transformative projects, but we have a whole bunch of little projects in the network of the city. We currently have a list of about 100 that we think need to happen. And the exercise we asked you to do, we picked 10 of those projects off the list, not quite at random, but they're not necessarily the next 10 that we're going to do. They're 10 that we hear a lot of questions, concerns, requests for. And we asked you to score them. And so this is the list of 100 projects that is on the list. This is a map of the 100 projects, and kind of where the color coding is kind of how they score currently. But we identified criteria and tried to find a way, how do we prioritize these? It used to be maybe whoever had a council member's ear or a neighborhood that had the means to really show up and put a lot of pressure on, maybe got more done in their neighborhood. So we wanted to try and find a way, how can we make this a little bit more equitable? How can we have it be a little more data-driven and transparent? And so we identified some criteria, safety, and we presented those to City Council. And they said, this looks great, but we want you to double the scores for safety and for equity to make sure that the underinvested neighborhoods are getting their fair share. And so we did that. We rescored the projects and came up with a list. And so like I said, there's about 100 on the list, and we picked 10 of them for you to score yourselves. Hopefully you did it as homework. How many people did their homework and actually scored them ahead of time? All right. Great. Well, I'm going to ask you guys, your handout should have come with a sticky note or a number on your handout. Did they have a?
Dave, you guys were already split when.
Oh, you were already split. Okay, you're already at your tables. Never mind. Last year when we did this, everyone had to get up and play musical chairs and find their table. So what we're asking you to do is to review your score sheet with the group. work together to decide on a score for each project, put it on your score sheet, and we'll be walking around, Ross and Aaron and Jeremy and Brian and I will be walking around to answer the questions that you might have about projects, about scoring, about what we're asking for here. And when the groups are done, we'll discuss which projects rose to your top 3 and why, and then we'll compare those to what our scores are and see if they're similar or if we're way off. And the idea is that we hope that you learn a little bit about how we score projects and see this, but also, you know, having your eyes on this, having people who aren't just thinking about stuff all the time might have a different perspective. It might be able to show us something that we hadn't thought about. Maybe there's a criteria that we just totally missed that is really important to you. And so we want to hear about those things. Last year we had some really great conversations with folks. We walked around, and so look forward to doing that here. So as just a quick refresher, if people didn't do their homework ahead of time, we have 10 projects on the list. Scott Street from over the bridge, basically from Westside Park at Lowell School, up over the bridge and connecting to some of the new housing that has been going in there and that continues to be redeveloping up in that area. Greeno Duncan, the west side of the Rattlesnake, getting sidewalks and bike lanes and you know, appropriate stormwater treatment and all that stuff along there. 23rd Street down in the South Hills. We received a Safe Routes to School grant to do part of that project up closer to Chief Charlo a little over a decade ago, and we haven't been able to put a project together to bring the sidewalks all the way down the hill, so that's on the list. Speaking of other school projects, when MCPS built the Rankin School in Miller Creek, they didn't have the money and we didn't have the money to complete the sidewalks on Lower Miller Creek Road there from where they end at Linda Vista. And so finishing that project out and connecting to that school.
Missoula Redevelopment Association.
No one's here. Some of these projects are in URD and in urban renewal districts, and some of them aren't. Some of them are. South 3rd Street West. From about 10 years ago, we were able to do this section from Russell to Reserve, but continuing something similar from Reserve out to the end of city limits. Hawthorne School, and again another kind of connection to the school there. And the Hawthorne School catchment area includes the River Road neighborhood, and so that is, it's not just, that school doesn't just serve people west of Reserve. That I mentioned the connection, that Milwaukee Trail extension up to George Elmer and Mary Jane, through, across the river there. In the River Road neighborhood, that's one that is really kind of a lot of cul-de-sacs, not a lot of through streets, a lot of infill has been happening, and so looking at 2 projects in that neighborhood. One is Curtis, a north-south street, kind of the only north-south connection that goes all the way from 3rd to River Road, and then River Road itself between Russell and Reserve. California Street in the neighborhood, that's kind of the only north-south connection through the Sawmill district. And we've seen Wyoming redevelop, we've seen the ball field and Silver Park, but what about connecting from the California Street Bridge to all the way to the slant streets? That's a project on here. Just above that, the little dot there, is the signal at Broadway, Toole, California. That if you've ever tried to walk through it and you got gray while you waited till you got your signal, turning that one into a roundabout, turning that signal into a roundabout that has some safety benefits and would be much better for pedestrians, and depending on time, it certainly works with the traffic volumes and would be able to flow, and so we've looked into the feasibility of that, and that seems to be plausible. So those are the projects that we're asking you to look at. We provided several criteria. The top criteria that we use are plan conformity. Have we been planning for this for a while, and does it meet our goals, our planning goals? Connectivity, does it connect to other facilities? Similarly, is it an isolated route, the only way in or out of a neighborhood? Scores work high for things that are well connected and that are not connected at all, because it's an important connection. Access, in this instance, we don't mean accessibility from like a mobility or disability standpoint, but from a destinations. Does this place serve a lot of different types of destinations, or is it mostly single-family homes? And then the 2 big ones that I mentioned, safety. Is there a crash history? Does that crash history have serious injuries?
Does it have, a lot of people biking and walking getting hit? Does the project actually address mitigate those crashes? And then equity. Is this in a neighborhood that has high percentages of people with disabilities, zero-car households? What are some of the other characteristics? High percentages of people under the age of 18 or over the age of 65. We have, again, all of that data that played into a kind of priority map that was shared in the packet. And then some of the secondary criteria that we use that I don't think we gave to you is leverage, such as, is this in an urban renewal district? Could the MRA bring some funding to the table to help us with this project? Or is there a private development project that's going to do one of the 7 blocks, they're going to develop their frontage? That could be a good time for us to do a project too. And then readiness. Does this project need a whole bunch of engineering that we haven't begun yet? Or do we have a set of plans ready to bid and go? So those are some kind of secondary criteria that we use also, but I don't think we fed that stuff to you. We just gave you those base criteria. So with that, I'll turn it over. I'll just stop talking and let you guys score amongst yourselves, and we'll walk around and try and answer questions. Do you have a question?
Yeah, do you mind answering one question on the Broadway tool column with the roundabout first?
Sure.
You were saying that would also help reduce pedestrian challenges because there's a light there right now. I'm not sure I understand how pedestrians navigate a complex roundabout like that.
Yeah, so it would be only one leg that you'd have to cross at a time. That's one way. So instead of having to get all the way across, you'd have a refuge, like a median to cross. So you'd only be crossing one lane of traffic at a time. Another is that you would be able to cross every leg. Right now, you can only cross on one side. You can go from the gas station across Toole, where you're on that little peninsula, and then you can cross on that side. When the roundabout goes in, you'd be able to cross all legs of the intersection.
And would you have a light that would stop traffic, or would you have to run out there and stop it with your body?
Well, roundabouts are designed for traffic to enter at about 15 to 18 miles an hour instead of the 35 that they're currently going through that intersection. So that would be the main thing, is that they would be, the geometry would slow vehicles as they're entering and give them more time to see you. And again, because your crossing distances would be much shorter, your exposure would be much, much less.
Thank you.
On any of them, that one included, where you have a roundabout on a major street, are these roundabouts designed so that larger trucks would be able to?
Yes, this would be a full-size roundabout like the one at Higgins Hill Beckwith, where you have the not only a wide travel lane, but you'd have the mountable apron for the really large trucks to go around. And we've already put the footprint, that would be needed on a map and seen that we have the room for it.
I live about 6/10 of a mile from Toole, just inside of Broadway. In my horror, when I read that, is there's always cars going by. The only busier street that I know in Missoula than that is Reserve Street. If you put a circle, you back up traffic, won't you?
I don't know that we've done all the modeling, but it's certainly within the traffic volumes, the daily volumes are within the tolerance of a circular intersection. So for that one's not quite as ready as some of the other projects on this list. When we talk about additional studying being needed, we'd have to look a little more closely at that. But based on the guidance from federal highways and the state DOT on what a roundabout can handle, it can handle the amount of Broadway traffic.
Is it true that the traffic circle generally backs up traffic less than the
Typically, it backs it up less than at a stoplight. At a rush hour, that where you need to look at it really is that peak hour time period. And, there's a limit, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's high. It's higher than what's on Broadway today.
Just quick question. I'm not sure I understand what an edge lane road is and how that works. Is that something you could talk about for just a sec?
Sure. So an edge lane road is a treatment that, quite frankly, there's only a couple dozen of them in North America so far. It's kind of a Dutch design that it puts the bike lanes kind of in into the travel lanes a little bit. So currently, a typical street that has bike lanes on it, your bike lanes are 6 feet wide, and then each of your driving lanes is 10 feet wide. So you'd have a total width between parked cars of 32 feet. And that is great when it's busy and everyone's using it and everyone can go. But on a street that's less busy, what that does is it creates a really wide street that a driver, if no one's coming and there's no bikes, can go super fast down. And on California Street, it's less busy and there isn't a ton of right-of-way to work with. And so an edge lane road, we've decided, is a pretty good treatment there. And what that does is it stripes the bike lane inside. Instead of having 2 travel lanes, you have about 15 feet of space instead of 20 feet of space for those 2 travel lanes. But the cars are allowed to use the bike lane to pass each other when there isn't a bicycles present. And you would dash the line instead of having a solid line to use. And so it's a way to share space. Basically what it does is it creates striping that would work just like a neighborhood street would work. You know, it's a slightly busier street than a neighborhood street, than say a quiet street in the slant streets or the University District or the West Side or something. But it's how it works today, that if you're biking down the street, a car needs to travel into the oncoming lane to pass you, but there's the likelihood that someone's coming the other way is pretty low.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? And we'll come around, like I said, we'll come around and walk and talk with you guys as you score these. All right, let's get scoring. Okay, everybody, gonna wrap up conversation here. If someone on your group has a phone and you can scan this QR code, it will take you to a ranking page and you can enter your project. You should be able to enter your ranks and then we can start to see how they all shake out against each other. One person from each group to do your table's ranks.
Depending on where I am, I like that area, especially when I'm biking.
Has any table not scanned it yet? And I'll open up the page that will show the results to start pouring in. You haven't put it in, but you've used the QR. Have you gone to the website?
You're a fan of that?
Okay. Has every table scanned the QR code?
You were the first person that started.
Table in the back there, whatever. Have you guys scanned the QR code yet?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to change it to go to the results page. Jeez. Well, maybe we're going to have to go the old-fashioned way. I'm going to call on the tables and ask for your top 3 projects. We'll start. Who's table number 1? All right, table number 1. What was your top project?
California Street. Yeah.
California Street, number 1. Okay. Did anyone else have California Street as their top project? Well, yeah, okay. Anyone else have the top 3? 1, 2.
Yeah, we.
Oh, number 1 also. Okay. Number 3, top 3. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I looked at the wrong. I saw California.
Scott Curtis, 23rd. What were your top 3? You had California?
Then Broadway Tool, California, and then Scott.
And then Scott. Okay. What did you guys have in your top 3?
Number 1, Broadway Tool, California. Number 2, Scott Street. And number 3 was California Street.
California Street. Okay. Yours were exactly the same in your table?
We had number 1 as Scott Street, number 2 as the Milwaukee Trail Extension, and number 3 as the Broadway to California Roundabout.
Okay.
What was your one again?
Scott Street.
Scott Street, Milwaukee Trail Extension, and then the roundabout at Broadway and California Tool. What did you guys have?
Same as the others, Broadway Tool, California Street by itself, and Scott Street.
And Scott Street. Okay. And back table.
We had number 1 was Scott Street, 2 was Broadway Tool, and 3 was Curtis.
Who's Curtis? Okay.
We have yeah.
You got tied with Curtis. We had a Curtis River Road made the top 3, right? Or only Curtis, not River Road? No one had River Road in their top 3? Okay. Scott Street was almost everyone's. I can safely say that Scott Street is, it's happening. I don't know that it's necessarily a top scoring project, but it's one that is, at least the first phase is happening really soon. Okay, did we get bids back? Did we get bids? Or we went to bid? It's happening this summer. Okay, so yeah, Scott Street is happening this summer. The other, I heard Broadway California Tools scored it high in most tables. That one has a funding source, but still needs a bit of work in conjunction with MBT. Broadway is the business I-90 route, and so we've done some of the feasibility analysis and some of the design, but we're working with them to make sure that that's going to work.
Where does 23rd stand?
23rd is currently kind of a middle scorer in our list. And we know that it's in rough shape, we know that it's needed, but because of the hillside and because of the distance from Chief Charlo, it's actually, the kids there get bused, which, I mean, yes, if you have to wait for a bus on 23rd, that's pretty bad, but the buses do go on the side streets, and it's one that there's not a ton of redevelopment potential necessarily, and the equity scores aren't as high, and fortunately, knock on wood here, there have not been many crashes on 23rd, despite being a curvy street on a hill. And so there are places where there's just been a much higher crash history. California Street scored high for everyone. What were some of the reasons that California scored, that appealed to people? The redevelopment chunk, okay. What else? Does the connectivity, did that? I talked to some tables that bike and use it today to access the bridge. Did that factor in? Were there things that we were missing? Was there data that you wanted or a way to talk about these projects that we didn't provide?
On the street sidewalk gaps, there were no schools listed. So those are high traffic for minors and doing their own thing, right? That would have really helped on importance of where to focus.
Okay, that was supposed to be part of the access piece, but you wanted actually to see the buildings identified to help with that. Okay, we'll fix that for next time we do this exercise.
We didn't quite see where it was clear about our future development projections, like what will traffic be like in 20 to 50 years. We felt like that could be factored in more. We also thought about opportunities for green projects, having a regenerative relationship with the land, doing a monarch butterfly something instead of just grass. Another one is walkability for the increasing elder population. And then the last one is the ability to fit a bus carve out so that we can keep traffic moving and not have to stop all of the traffic when the bus stops.
Okay, yeah, all good things, and some of those are tied into measures that we have, but some of them maybe do need a little more attention on their own.
We wanted I don't think anybody else chose the Milwaukee project as the top three. And
you guys had no, it wasn't a top scorer for you guys?
We were really
Okay.
impressed with the visionary nature of the thing, even though there was missing information because it doesn't exist.
Okay, so you liked the forward-thinking nature.
I wanted it to be number one, but I felt like it was self-serving, and so.
What's everybody's number 10?
Oh, good question. What's everyone's number 10? Greeno.
Ours wait till someone dies.
Yours was Milwaukee Trail.
Sorry, I kind of
Okay, how come it was so low for you?
Because it benefits just a small segment of the population, the bikers, and there weren't as many people who would benefit from it.
We'll encourage more bikers to improve quality of life.
What it changed, we heard that the kind of what does growth look like in 20 to 30 years. Would it help if you had seen that they were expecting 10,000 housing units in that area of Westmoreland that would connect to? That it could be a quicker bike ride to downtown from there if the trail extends than it would be to drive? I don't know. The other outlier there, so we didn't include costs in any of these. We think that all the projects except Milwaukee Trail are in about the $2 million range. The Milwaukee Trail is probably like 7 or something. So that one is an outlier. But million. It's 4 bridge expansions across the Clark Fork there.
Some of the how were the sidewalks and whatnot installed as we were putting in the new roundabouts and extending it while they were putting
The Out Mullen Road, that one. So that was paid for with a federal grant, a large federal.
I mean, from the way it was described, it didn't sound like sidewalks and like a greenway for people to be able to move through there was included in that when it was built out. It sounded like it needed to be rebuilt with it. Be put in post-project.
We didn't receive all the money that we applied for, and so some of those features we're relying on the development to put in as it fills in the gaps.
Okay.
And there's also some infrastructure, if you put it in, there's no one there to maintain it. So like sidewalks and boulevards and trees, if there's no development there to maintain it, it just can deteriorate a lot faster. So there's some benefit to getting the core infrastructure in, and then as development fills in, you kind of do the rest of it.
What order do you guys have your city have these in already?
I don't have my form in front of me, but California Street is high, Scott Street is high, 23rd and Duncan are probably the 2 lowest on the list right now. The California Broadway roundabout is high. The River Road and Curtis are like at maybe about a third of the way down that list, or a little bit higher, and they're pretty close to each other. In fact, it's one of the things when we start to program a project in a neighborhood in the next couple of years, hopefully, we're going to work closely with that neighborhood to really try and tease out what is the priority, because there's pros and cons to doing each of those roads sooner than later, and so we really want to make sure that we're going to do the best we can as soon as possible there.
One thing that we did discuss was the Lower Miller Creek. With the continued growth, the school and everything, where's your perspective now on punching another bridge across the Bitterroot?
That was looked at back in the early aughts, and there were 2 main barriers to that. One is the kind of fish and wildlife, and like adding another bridge across the Bitterroot is really, really difficult. And then the other is that it actually counterintuitively, it doesn't solve that much traffic problems, because all the traffic still ends up at the Miller Creek 93 intersection, because if it crosses at Blue Mountain and takes a right, it still just takes a right and jams up at that one pinch point. And so that's a challenge there. So it seemed like it would be a lot of money, would take a ton of environmental work, and for not a ton of traffic benefit. Now, maybe there's an argument for evacuation or something, and I think that maybe we'll have to look at that at some point, but for the near term, it doesn't make much sense.
The last generation was missing. I think we all found it a little bit difficult to kind of jump from different maps that were oriented in different directions or different graphics. If there was like a key plan that was uniform on every sheet, I think it would be really helpful to quickly understand where we're looking at. Yeah.
Okay. So just orientation from project to project, having a little more consistency there would help.
Yeah.
I noticed there wasn't anything for the University District. Don't throw tomatoes. Because we have major, we're old.
You're old, it's true, and this project list, we're going to be rescoring everything within the next year or two. That our scores we had initially done these in 2020, and so it's starting to get a little bit out of date. We've accomplished a handful of projects that were at the top of the list, and got grant funding to do a few more, and so we plan to reassess, and maybe some of those will bump up. There are, on the longer list, there are university projects, just not on these 10 that we chose for this. One more, and then I gotta turn it over to Melissa, I think.
Do you have like a list of smaller projects or things that you say, well, gee, I don't know if your goal is to spend all your money in 1 year or whatever, what you're doing, but ever say, oh, we have all this money left over, we've got this list of small projects, maybe we can pick something and get her done.
We do, as soon as you're looking in like engineering and concrete work, it's no longer a small project, but we are trying to identify ways that, well, can we solve the majority of the issues with some striping and signs and maybe some plastic posts and calm traffic a bit and buy some time to save up and do a bigger infrastructure project. And that's something that we do kind of continually try and look at. And, I mentioned that master list of 100 projects. Some percentage of them, there's only a hardscape. You know, we're going to have to do a permanent installation. It's going to have to be a big project. But some of them, we could maybe do everything that is identified in the project need just in some cheaper materials. And so we're trying to identify where are the ways that we can do that and how can we knock some of those off the list sooner. Thank you very much. I hope that this was a helpful exercise. Jeremy, do you have any questions? Okay, all right. So I think Melissa has a couple housekeeping things for next week, but thank you all. And yeah, if you have more questions, I don't think we included our contact, but I'll gladly share an email and happy to talk more about this stuff.
Thank you, you guys are great.
If you have the Engage Missoula page, I don't know if Ben mentioned that, but all of this information is on, it's under the community investment program.
Transportation. I think you get on Engage Missoula, and then in the little search thing, put transportation in there. It'll pull up. I think Ben's going to pull it up.
And we have some interactive maps and things that help explore it too. So there's more there that if you really want to dive deep. Some of us call that fun, others.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Public Works and Mobility. We as neighborhoods work super closely with them, so really appreciative of you guys taking your time. Okay, housekeeping rules. Next week we will be in here, but at 6 o'clock.